Hello, this is Dr. Harriet Fraad on Capitalism Hits Home, an interpersonal update. This is a show about the intersection of capitalism, class, and our personal lives.
Hello. This is part 2 of a question that has perplexed me and perhaps you too. Why do 38% of the American people still support Donald Trump, even though our economy is in shambles? We have the worst world's record on COVID. We're threatened. Every problem we had of violence and violation has increased in the chaos and pain of a pandemic that's pandemonium, that is not coordinated and helped at the top. Why do 38% still support Donald Trump? Well, I think that 38% doesn't want to admit they made a dangerous mistake endorsing this madman. They're ignorant and ill-informed, and so is he, endorsing quack schemes like drinking Clorox or disinfectants or buying hydrochloroquine because there's money in it, that they're suckers that fell for this. They don't want to admit that. They also don't want to admit that corporate America has thrown them on the slag heap. If they're going to invest in new factories, they're not going to invest in our nation. They're going to invest where they can make more money, because that is their motive. More for them. Someone like Bezos, who has over $150 billion now, can spend it however he wants. He doesn't even have a qualm about helping the workers in his crowded factories that get COVID. Those are their ethics, and they don't care. This is the president who will send them back to work while supporting legislation that their employers will not be responsible for their illness and death because they have unsafe conditions at work. That's what McConnell held up, the desperately needed help for the masses of the unemployed. That's what he held them up around, because he wants to make sure employers don't ever have to bear responsibility for the pain and death they cause. They don't want to admit when the money is given to corporations, they're not going to invest in businesses here. They're going to invest in Brazil. They're going to invest in China, in Pakistan, in Bangladesh. The money, if it has to be spent here, will be spent in the stock market, raising the stock market and giving them even more profit. And one has to remember that only 7% of the Americans have stocks that matter at all in their day-to-day life. Only 7% live from not their labor, but their holdings in the stock market. They don't want to admit it's over unless they reclaim this country as a country that can produce things, that can cooperate, that has ideals, that welcomes people. Like the Statue of Liberty said, give me your tired, your poor, your hungry masses yearning to breathe free. It's more like I can't breathe. And not only that, there's a knee on their necks, and it's a corporate knee, and they can't even admit they can't breathe. They're like George Floyd, pretending the angels are calling him. And that's why he's fading away, rather than that Derek Chauvin is choking him to death with a knee on his neck. They don't want to admit that American greatness can be the greatness of a generous, inclusive nation which is what the demonstrators are fighting for, not the great conqueror. That's over. We've lost all the wars since World War II. Or had a draw in Vietnam and Korea and lost in Iraq and Afghanistan in spite of the trillions spent. That America is not what it was in the late 50s and 70s when the other economies of the world were decimated, including, of course, China's. China had their revolution in 1959 and was a poor and backward country where women could be sold before the revolution. Not that it's a paradise, I'm not saying that, I'm just talking about progress. We're not admitting, they are not admitting that if we, like the other nations of the world, learned from China's expertise and did what China did, we wouldn't have COVID. Or if we learned from all of Europe and the other nations that the government should give 70 to 90% of the workers' salaries who are unemployed so we'd have a functioning economy, and really spent on protecting our citizens, we'd be back. Our economy would be back like theirs. But they don't want to admit they made a mistake, just like Trump. Trump ran on the rage that was a righteous rage. People realized they'd been had. The jobs that they had that guaranteed a middle income living were gone. They weren't gone because refugees took them, or uppity women, or people of color. They were gone because the big corporations exported them for more money for themselves, and then bought our government and our media to disguise that message so that people would blame someone else and certainly not blame them. They're very angry. They used to feel great, and they identify with Make America Great, just like the Germans under Hitler. Germany über alles, over everyone. That Hitler came in because the Germans were dispossessed in the punitive settlements after World War I, because they had a terrible inflation in which you needed a wheelbarrow to pay for something like butter. And if you got the butter in the afternoon rather than the morning, you'd have to pay more. And they were losing. Americans aren't in that dire situation, but they're losing. They're losing the American dream. It's gone. Every generation of white males' wages aren't going up. They've flattened since the mid-70s. And either people could say, oh my God, we're losing to a corporate elite. Let's join together and fight to reclaim a country for everyone. They identify with the top. And they hate anyone beneath them. Suck up, kick down, as the vernacular says. They don't even want to look. They don't want to admit it. Trump ran quite righteously on ending the swamp of corruption and corporate primacy that was there in previous America. Reagan on, it was untrammeled in previous America. Although when Reagan began, the top income tax bracket was 70% of your income. Now it's about 33% of your income. And of course, you can just outsource your wealth to Panama, places in Panama or the Canary Islands or, wherever, and pay no taxes, like Trump, or 13%, like Romney told us he made. He did pay taxes, 13%, more than his secretary or janitor had to pay. They didn't want to see any of that. So while saying that he would drain the swamp, he hired the swamp, and they don't want to admit it. Now, what am I talking about? He hired the swamp. Well, Betty DeVos is the Secretary of Education. Her net worth is $2 billion, and her portfolio, I Took notes here. Includes real estate in Michigan, the Bahamas, states in Orlando Magic and the Chicago Cubs, private equity investments in the at-home retail chain, and Elon Musk's SpaceX. She and her husband are both billionaires. Wilbur Ross is our Secretary of Commerce. And none of his cabinet includes working class people. Wilbur Ross is worth $400 million. Steven Mnuchin, our Secretary of the Treasury, his net worth is $400 million. These are the swamp. Goldman Sachs is where Mnuchin is from. Barr, his Attorney General, is worth $40 million in corporate holdings. Robert Lighthizer, our U.S. trade representative, is worth $25 million. Note, all these people worth all this money. Ben Carson, the only person of color on his cabinet, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, is worth $20 million. Elaine Chao, who's married to McConnell and has a successful shipping business in China. She has board seats and stock compensation from Wells Fargo, News Corp, Vulcan Materials, and her family owns Foremost Group, a big shipping conglomerate with bulk carriers that's worth $1.2 billion. Chow inherited $59 million in assets for herself, which she shares with her husband, Mitch McConnell, who controls what we can vote on and what we can't. Alex Azar, who is worth $15 million and is our Secretary of Health and Human Services, really in touch with the mass of people. He spent a decade working for Eli Lilly, the big pharmaceutical company, where he earned a salary of $2 million. And he built up $3.4 million in Eli Lilly stock. He replaced Tom Price, the previous head of Health and Human Services, who had to leave because of ethics scandals. This is the swamp. I'll just mention one other swamp creature, Dan Coates, Director of National Intelligence. He's worth a mere $15 million, and he owns big blocks of stock in Coca-Cola. They hear Trump's words praising these people who are controlling their lives, who are the heads, cabinet heads of agencies who are supposed to protect Americans and instead squander our savings and immiserate us. And they want so badly to believe their great leader that they don't look twice at what's actually happening to their lives. They're upset at rampant corruption, and they should be. They're upset at rampant political lying, and they don't look at Trump's lies, even though he lies like a rug, as they say. He can't give a speech without lying. He both embodies the swamp, he poses as a self-made billionaire. We don't know how much money he actually has, probably much less than that, because unlike every other president, he won't reveal his taxes. But we know that he's in debt and that he's hiring the swamp. Trump also ran on ending the forever wars that are so expensive. And Americans rallied as they should. We spend as much on the military as we spend on our whole social services budget for everybody. And they wanted to stop the endless forever wars that never win anything. Trump has given more to the military every year. And the Democrats have gone along with it. They're right to be angry at the government and the people our government so faithfully serves by dishing out billions that the military spends to keep America the biggest military spender, even if we lose the wars we fight. We do destroy other countries. We have that power, and we certainly use it well, causing shock and awe and hatred for us around the globe. Facing the reality of what's happened to our country is something that Trump's followers refuse. They refuse to see that our life expectancy is going down. We're even growing less tall than we used to. We used to be the tallest people in the world. Not anymore. Now the Swiss and the Swedish are the tallest, the best fed, the best nourished. He touts American healthcare as the best in the world. It spends the most on healthcare because we have the most expensive market-driven healthcare system in the world, and all the other nations of Europe have free quality healthcare. It's a scandal. But he says we are the best. We have the best. He's like an arrogant, abusive, authoritarian parent who says we're the best family. And don't you dare ask questions. The prescriptions in an authoritarian family are 3 prescriptions, which are those in an alcoholic family too. Don't ask questions about us. Don't tell what's really going on. And don't know what's really going on. And they obey those prescriptions, not to know, so that they can retain their illusion that we are the greatest, that white men are the greatest, that they are superior. At least they're not black. They can congratulate themselves on that. They don't want to face the reality and disaster of America under Trump or America under all the presidents since Carter. They don't want to fight corporate America for prosperity and a decent standard of living. In order to do that, they would have to join with all of their peers across the board and fight the way Europeans have, as a working class, fighting together to have a better standard of living. Instead, they want to suck up and kick down. They're cowards like Trump, Captain Bone Spurs, as he's known by many because he claimed to have bone spurs so he couldn't fight in the war in Vietnam, although he could play golf to his heart's content. His father got a doctor who was on his payroll to write that Trump had bone spurs so he didn't have to go to the war. And then he didn't honor the war dead because it was a rainy day and his orange makeup would probably come off. And God knows if his hair would come off too. It's all fake. They're worshiping a fake. A man with fake skin, fake teeth, fake politics, fake greatness. fake authority, fake knowledge, all of it. And they're refusing to believe in science, in the lessons of history, and in the fact that they have fallen. The lower middle class is not going to provide a better life for their children than they had, even if they're white and in families headed by an authoritarian male. They can't. The little grocery store is now Walmart or Stop and Shop. The little drugstore with its individual pharmacist is now CVS, Rite Aid, Walgreens. And they're lucky if they'll get a low-level retail job there. The little mom and pop dress store is now Amazon, run by the richest man in the world. They can't hand their legacy down to their children. They have none. And they also don't want to admit that their only chance, and our only chance as a nation, is to have we, the 99%, or actually more, the 90%, join together with everyone in our nation who wants to join. Even Bezos could join if he wants to and contribute richly. Would be very welcome to join so that all of our lives matter. Because the reason that people are demonstrating in Black Lives Matter, which Trump has denounced, is that people realize that within racist America, some people think that if you're Black, your life doesn't matter. And because they suspect, and somewhere deeply they know, their lives don't matter either. That's why they're encouraged to go back to work and send their children back to school. So there's a semblance of normality. And so rich people who only make money because they have other people working for them and making the money for them can continue to be rich. That's the only reason. And so we are at a moment of enormously important decision-making in the United States. We have to decide whether we're going to continue to delude ourselves, which we have for a long time, even before Trump. He's just more extreme and more grotesquely obvious than his forebears. But it's the same idea. Rob from the mass of people who struggle to work for a living, for whom 40% don't have $400, and this was before the grotesque recession, didn't have $400 in case of the worst emergency. Do we join with others, the other 90%, to make America a country great in compassion, great in production, great in welcome of others, great in sharing? Or do we descend further into the abyss because we're covering for a liar and a cheat, just like many of us covered for our authoritarian parents and the churches that ripped us off and raped us, or the education that denied us the ability to question and learn. It's a moment of real choice. And young people are leading that choice. They're not in the 38% that support Trump. He doesn't have many young people. They're, in fact, in the group that showed Trump up at the Tulsa rally, that used TikTok to apply for tickets, so he thought he had 1 million people there, and he had a paucity of people and was shamed. because for them, the doors of opportunity are closing on their hands. They have to be in science, engineering, the STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, or math to make a living. And a lot of those jobs are being outsourced overseas as well. Or they have to be the children of wealthy people who get them into prestigious universities, as we recently saw with that scandal, or who give them jobs in the family corporation or with the friend of the family who has a corporation for that son. Like Hunter Biden was given a job with the Ukrainians where he made a lot of money with no qualifications and having been thrown out of the army. Wealthy people connect their children. All the other children are not connected, and their future is bleak. And so why those 38% of Americans who support Trump because they want to believe the great leader, even if he's a sham. They want to believe that America's greatness is its dominance over other countries, rather than its ability to coexist. They want to believe in the military and support all those generals that Trump has had in his administration, most of whom quit in disgust, but nonetheless, to look like we're mighty, even though we've lost every war or had to break even. North and South Korea, North and South Vietnam. The only one we wore was over Grenada, which is smaller than Rhode Island. Come on. But trillions are being spent. They don't want to face that. They want to believe that Trump mouths end the forever wars that are so expensive, drain the swamp, but actually maintains and hires the swamp. Because they can't face that we are a declining empire. And what we have, we can share and have a decent life if all of us unite together, because all of our lives matter. And that's what I've come to, looking at that question. Why do 38% of Americans still support Donald Trump?
Thank you for listening. This episode has been brought to you by Democracy at Work. Please support our work. Visit our website at democracyatwork.info.